Hi, my name is Robin, and welcome to Conversations About a Brighter Way.
And I'm Adam Grant, the Executive Director of A Brighter Way.
And we will be your hosts for this season, which is entitled Welcome Home. We'll be talking with people about their experiences re-entering society post-incarceration. What does that feel like?
Honestly, that first 4 days, it was almost as bad as being in a prison.
What challenges did they face upon release?
I did 30 interviews, and every one of them offered me a job. And every one of them rescinded it once they ran it up the flagpole, despite the fact that I had been honest and forthright.
And what resources they found to help them navigate their path towards a brighter way.
Family and friends, those were the most valuable resources. Knowing that, like he said, I'm not doing this alone.
And at this point, I'll tell you a little bit about A Brighter Way, since you may not be aware of what we do. And our services are summed up in our tagline where we say reentry through relationship. Ultimately, the main thing that we do is a mentoring program, because we believe in a side-by-side model, not a case management model. We're people, ultimately, and so people need help. And so that's what we do, is we do this side by side, whether it's education, employment, housing, relationships, whatever the case may be. We just kind of work with individuals. We have specialized mentors that have been through this themselves. They've been paroled and gone through the parole process. They've experienced the collateral consequences of incarceration. And then we have other people who haven't been through the experience but have a lot of life experiences anyway. So they can help them set up a business. They can help them do their resume. They can help teach them technology. So again, reentry through relationship, whether it's relationship with the individuals on a mentor basis or whether it's relationships between various organizations.
Let's get to our episode. And this week, we'll be speaking to Patrick about their experience. And Patrick, I want to thank you in advance for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for allowing me to share.
May I have your name again? How long were you incarcerated, and how long have you been out?
So my name is Patrick Domingo, and I am 27 years old. I'm going to be 28 in August, and I was incarcerated for about a year and 2 months. I got out on, I believe, sometime in August 2nd of 2021, and I've been out since then, so about almost a year.
So you got out dead smack in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, it was a weird thing, because it's like when I got taken into custody in July of 2020, felt like everything was starting to hit and everyone else was starting to go into lockdown. So I actually experienced COVID lockdown while I was in prison. So it was a little weird going through those procedures, because it felt like, at least here in Arizona, that DOC was still trying to figure out how to deal with the virus as everything was happening. So it was kind of a messy first couple months there. So.
That's a good description of most DOCs as messy.
So walk me through getting out. I want to know about the entire day. What did you do? Who picked you up? What did you eat?
Getting out was one of those things where I would talk to my girlfriend pretty much every day, whenever I could. I'd talk about it and I'd try and plan it, because I'd talk to them about all the things that it was that I had been missing out, even since I was in county, and I had a good idea of what it was that I would have wanted. So the day that I got out was just very much planned, but it didn't take away from the stress of it. I went to sleep really late. I was very restless the last night that I was there. I was one of those people that couldn't get to sleep the last night. I ended up going to sleep at about 2 a.m. And unfortunately, in the complex that I was in, my bed was facing a window. So it's as soon as the sun came up at 4 a.m, I was up. Couldn't get back to sleep after that. So it's just I took a shower, got ready. I had talked with a lot of people before. It's what is this gonna look like when I get out? So I had a fairly good idea. Could be a long process. So I was anticipating at least, okay, it's by noon I will be out and I will be free. And that's pretty much what happened. they called me up at around 10 o'clock and I took my stuff up. A couple of the guys that I had become friends with at the complex I was at walked me to the gate, and I left all my stuff there. And it was a weird situation because normally it's like if you leave the complex, it's like they had to like strip you out, search you, cuff you up if you were going like anywhere, sort of thing. It wasn't like so intense because I was on a lower level yard, but we got stripped out like often. So it's like going and leaving the complex and not like getting like stripped out was like a little bit like unreal. And then getting my clothes was like a lot too. I had like, only been wearing like orange and like white like the entire time that I was incarcerated. Is like one of the things that I missed like a lot was like color, and like leaving the complex, that was like one thing that like became very like overwhelming to me. Was like there's just like so much like color like everywhere.
That's one of the things I think a lot of people don't understand if you haven't experienced it. Not only the color aspect, when you get used to orange, and in Michigan it's blue and orange. But when you get used to those colors and then you start to see other colors, it's jarring sometimes for your eyes. But the other part too is I was watching Robin's face when you were talking about getting stripped out. And there's things that you get used to doing. If you leave a facility, you get strip searched, and you get strip searched when you come off of visits, and you go through this process. And then when you leave, you don't. One of the things that I found most interesting when I left was going through those doors and being able to take full steps because I didn't have shackles on, because you take usually these short, choppy steps. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting. I was listening to you describe your experience, and it kind of brought me back to my own. So
yeah, and that's like one of those things that I felt like I never got used to it. It's like it happened like a handful of times. Luckily, the job that I was in, it started happening like less and less, but like each time it happened, getting stripped out and like getting checked and all that, having to go through like the motions, because it's like they tell you it's like, okay, take off like all your clothes and like everything, and then it's like, okay, your hair and like all that other stuff. And yeah, it's like a lot to like go through. And it's like there was like a period when I had like my first job in the kitchen where it was happening every time I would like go to work, and then it like after that it was just anytime I needed to like UA and like do stuff like that. But it was like always like felt like really like invasive like every time too. So
which it is, because that's the other thing that people don't understand a lot of times is anybody who's been incarcerated understands bend and spread 'em, and they understand squat and cough, which are two different ways that you get strip searched. Squat and cough is actually the more effective one for contraband. Bend and spread 'em is the more demeaning one, and it's usually the one that is employed the most often for that very reason, because of its dehumanization factor, and it's a power issue.
That's pretty powerful. I can't imagine.
No, and we'll have some different people that'll come on here and share their stories in different ways, and whether we talk about that aspect or not, sometimes it's even worse for women. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes, at least like back in the day, this was also taking place with a male officer, or they'll come by when they're in the shower or something like that. And it's a power issue. So yeah. Anyway, I didn't want to go off into the deep dark weeds, but it happens.
So Patrick, can you continue with your day of getting out? So they called you at 10 o'clock, right?
Yeah, so at about 10 o'clock, I'm like here at the gate with my stuff, and I could like see the building that I needed to go to. The property building was just like right across the way. I could like see it from the building that I was at if I wanted to. So we go there, I get changed out, and then they take me to go and get my property and everything. And then it's like I finally am able to see my girlfriend, who I like hadn't seen, at least like in the flesh, in like like a year or so. And it like didn't feel real. Like a lot of the things like leading up to me getting released like didn't feel real. Like when they told me that my date had changed, it didn't feel real. I felt like that was like something that they were gonna like take away from me like any moment for like any reason. So it's like it was a relief when they told me, oh, you were gonna get out in October, but now you're gonna get out in August. It was like I felt like it should have been more of a relief, but then in my head it was like adding to like stress, because in my head it didn't feel real. It felt like, no, like they're lying to me, like, or like at the last moment they're gonna like take it away, and then it's like, oh no, you still gotta be here for another like few months. So even like holding my girlfriend and like hugging her, and driving away from the prison complex going into Winslow, and like seeing the town again, like all the colors and the people, different people. We stopped at a gas station, and it was like really overwhelming, because it's like that was like another thing too, is like I like went to use the bathroom at this gas station, and like had like more privacy like in the bathroom than I'd like had in like a year. Mm-hmm. So it's like that like type of privacy, like having a door like closed behind me when I was like in the bathroom, not being able to like see anyone else like in the bathroom, using the bathroom, or like showering, having it be like relatively like quiet, was like silence became like a thing where it was like, this is like weird and overwhelming. Like it was like a lot of sensory stuff with me. It was like really overwhelming.
Did you have a
experience
dorm setting at the facility you were at too? Was it kind of open bays?
Yeah, for me it was like a lot of we had like different buildings, but some of the bigger buildings in there were set up like dorms. And I was in the complex I was in, they moved us around a lot. So I was in one building that had, I think, like about 50 guys on like one side of the building, and then 50 guys on the other side of the building. And then in the smaller buildings, I think it was like a little bit nicer situation, where it's like, okay, 6 guys to a room, and then there were like maybe 4 rooms on each side. So it was like a little bit quieter, but I spent the majority of the time there in like those like 50-man dorms buildings.
So how was it touching your girlfriend for the first time?
It was like really overwhelming, just because, and this is like something that I had like talked to like one of the other guys that I became friends with in here. It's just like that kind of like intimate, like I get touch. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily like get like a lot, like a hug or something. It's like, you're not going to be getting like a hug from like someone like on the yard like very often, like a lot of times. And even if you do, it's like, not the same
right
level of like intimacy. So like hugging my girlfriend again, like, holding like the person that I like love and like have been like waiting to like see for like, even though I didn't do like very much time, but just like being apart and then like being together again, it was just like I said, it just like didn't feel real. And, like that was like the thing, like none of it like really like felt real, I think. And that was like the feeling that like lingered, like at least like the like next couple days. It was like, yeah, I'm like gonna wake up and I'm gonna be like back in my like bed and gonna need to go to work or need to go do something else, get called for something on the yard, and then find out that I had like, maybe like however many more months. And yeah.
What was the visiting situation like when you were in there? Because I know you had the COVID situation, and I know that personally the visiting situation I was afraid was going to scar me, because there's, you can give a kiss at the beginning and the end of the visit. They decide how long that can last. Same thing with an embrace. If you get a picture, you could do another one here in Michigan, but you couldn't put a hand on the knee. You couldn't, like I couldn't rub her shoulder. I could put my arm around her, but I couldn't rub her shoulder. And I was really concerned that when I first went home that I was going to have all these concerns and not be able to touch her, normally. Did you have any of that?
I definitely had some of those same concerns that you did, but with my visiting situation, to answer that question, because I was going through the virus, they had employed virtual visits, had become more of a regular thing where I was at. So zero like contact like at all. Like, I'm just like sitting here with like headphones talking with you guys is like pretty much the same as a video visit was for me. I had a tablet with my girlfriend's picture, so I could like at least like see them and like I could like hear them. But like aside from that, it was I can't even remember the length of the visits anymore, but I want to say it was like half hour or like hour long like visits block. So it's like my girlfriend had to like schedule that like ahead of time and just make sure that they were like there. But being in Winslow, it was like windy like a lot of the time. So it's like signal strength was like a thing. Like even talking with like my mom, who is in Eloy, too, where like the internet isn't like so strong. It was like a struggle because then it was like the image would cut out or like the signal would drop and I would have to like wait for them to like come back on or like something like that. So at least like visiting with like my mom was like hard because I couldn't like hold a conversation with them because the signal would drop, and it was like frustrating more than it was like helpful. Yeah.
I know this is a little bit off script. It isn't one of the questions that we asked. So it's up to you whether or not you ask this one, but I think it's kind of relevant because it's kind of like some of the school situations where people are being, educated from a distance and stuff. If you're doing it in rural areas, and I know a little bit about your background, so I know we're talking about a rural area. So internet and high-speed internet, especially where you have video, is not readily available. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so definitely in Eloy, the internet strength is not great. Like if in our household growing up, if someone was like streaming a movie or like playing video games, it was one or the other. Because if you were trying to do two things on the internet at once, it was like gonna be slow or like the signal was gonna drop. It's just not good. Like Eloy is not like equipped for like internet, or at least like when I was growing up wasn't equipped for like that kind of like to do those types of things like video calling or things like that. So, and even Winslow is like pretty similar to Eloy. They're like both smallish towns, like rural out in the middle of like nowhere. And yeah, so like trying to do a video call was very frustrating because, that was like a limitation just like because of the surroundings.
So, do you remember what you ate on the day that you got out?
It was like something that I had talked with my girlfriend a lot, was like missing like a lot of like fresh fruit and like a lot of like fresh produce, because at least like coming from county jail down here in Pima County, they would give us like apples and oranges and like things like that, like occasionally. And of course, it's like that was like something that they aren't really like doing too much in DOC. It's like everything's like from a can. Like a lot of times, I think like except for like our Juneteenth meal had fresh watermelon, but like aside from that, frozen from a can, and was always like too sweet or like just tasted artificial, just didn't taste right. And or it's like wilted, rotten, like lettuce,
Mm-hmm.
like things like that. So that was like a big deal for me, was like I wanted like some fruit. I wanted like an apple, or I wanted like some grapes or something. Like I like wanted better tasting water. I'd been drinking water from a faucet for like a year, warm water, very hard water. Like, and it's like tasting like some like clean bottled water was like nice. It's like refreshing, and like same thing with like the fruit. And it's just like these things that I had appreciated it like before, but it was like coming out, it's like having it was like almost like having it for like the first time, just because it had been like that long, or just been like deprived of it, I guess.
Let me back up for a minute, Robin. I can't let this one go by, because this is I know it's Arizona, but these are the kind of little, in today's society, they would call them microaggressions and things like that. Maybe they're not even that micro, but it struck me that on the Juneteenth celebration, they didn't usually feed fruit, but they had the nerve to serve watermelon. Remember, this is Arizona, the place that would not recognize Martin Luther King's birthday and things like that. I mean, sometimes people, remember, this is me as a white male saying this, but think about this. This stuff is going on on a regular basis. And I just didn't want to let that moment go without saying something about that, because these are the other things, whether you're talking about the strip searches, whether you're talking about the choppy virtual visits, where you're talking about all these things that have kind of depersonalized people, and then you add something, like that to it. So I didn't mean to get on a soapbox in the middle of your story, Patrick, but I couldn't. That one hit me.
Oh, no problem. I can actually go off on that tangent as well. So they did holiday meals here like that. For the holidays, you get better meal because it's like celebration. One of the first things, or one of the holiday meals that they had like implemented while I was there was Native American or Indigenous people day. They got a celebration. They got like a meal, and it was like something like talking with the other Indigenous and Native American people on the yard. Talking about it. It was like we were like wondering. It's like, okay, well, what are they gonna do? It's like for like the day. It's like it has to be like fried bread, or it has to be like like mutton or something. It has to be something good. And then closer to the day came, we like get the menu, and it was like people don't like know that it's like, okay, we get like a menu cycle, so it's like the same meals like in a 6-week rotation, and it's like a lot of them are like similar enough with like different names, like a lot of like beans mixed with like ground meat, but that ended up being what it was that they like served us, only instead they gave us pita bread with it.
So what challenges did you have coming out?
So just to speak to a little bit about why I was incarcerated, because that is part of like the reason why I'm like struggling as much as I am currently. So on the morning of June 2nd in 2019, I was arrested for drunk driving. I was coming back from Eloy, going back to Tucson because I had needed to get to work early in the morning, and I was like trying to do something else. I was trying to finish up like a personal project in Eloy, and was very like bad at about mismanaging my time and my emotions. During that time, I was like drinking like pretty heavily, drinking regularly to like cope with like a lot of like the feelings that I was having, and like a lot of the negative feelings that I was like feeling like about myself and my work situation. I was like feeling like unhappy at work, and was like just like under a lot of stress. And then that night shooting, because I was like trying to shoot a short film with my brother and a friend, we decided to get drunk, and it ended up going on a lot longer than I had anticipated. And in my head, it was like, I just need to leave. I need to leave because I have work in a few hours. I need to like leave, go home, sleep for a little while, and like go and work. So I just like decided to, drive because I thought it was like a good idea. It was like I was like, I needed to like I said, just get these things done. And there was like a lot of construction going on, in the freeway, like around the time that I was, that this incident had happened, and I had somehow like crossed over into like the opposite end and was like driving for like a large stretch of the freeway, like on the opposite end of the road. I was going the wrong way on the freeway, and even though it was at night, there was like still other people on the freeway. So I got hit with a few counts of endangerment. I had my license suspended after I got my sentencing, and I found out that it's like, yeah, your license is going to be suspended for 3 years, and there's like nothing you can do about it. It's something that we automatically do anytime there's a report of endangerment connected with your license. So for me, like my biggest struggle is transportation. Is like I am relying on the public transportation system, which luckily because of COVID, it's been free. So that isn't something that I've been having to like worry about like too much. But so far as like getting to school and stuff, it's like using the bus or relying on my girlfriend or like Lyft. And, that's like really hard for me because it's like at least like where I'm like located, I'm like kind of away from like a lot of the city stuff. So finding a job, working almost anywhere has been like a struggle because it's like, oh, I need to make sure that it's close to a bus line, or I need to make sure that I can like get a ride there. Has been like really hard.
Right. So what about housing? Did you have housing when you left?
So luckily, because I had a lot of support coming from my mom, and especially coming from my girlfriend, I was able to come out and do the rest of my probation here with my girlfriend. So living in an apartment here with my girlfriend was just like really nice to like not have to worry about, am I gonna have to go to like a halfway house, or am I gonna need to figure out something with like my probation to like get it transferred over to live with my mom or like something like that. Was like one hoop that I luckily didn't have to worry about.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know this answer because I have not been a part of the criminal justice system, but do they offer halfway houses for anybody that's been released, even 30, 60, 90 days?
So this is something that I haven't really had too much experience with either, but it is something that I've like heard a lot of people talk about, and it's something that they'll give you the resources and the phone numbers and addresses for you to contact these people on your own, or at least like a few months before. It's like still all on you. Right. Before you're released to get these things like lined up. And a lot of times the like numbers and the resources that they have at least like available like in the library are like definitely like outdated, and like a lot of the businesses, some of them are like out of business, or some of them are like moved, or that's like the information's just like not up to date. It's like unreliable.
Right.
And a lot of times you have to rely on your CO3 to like, get you accurate information. And that's like, even if you can like get in to like talk with them, or even a lot of times if you like had like a competent like CO3 who's like willing to like help you and like put in that effort to like, search that information and get you that information so that you can, contact who you need to contact.
Sounds similar to what they have in Michigan as far as the resources being kind of outdated and antiquated. Some of that stuff's been floating around in the system for decades, and it hasn't existed for that long too. But we do have, in Michigan, we've got a little bit different system. So they actually have what's called offender success housing. Can't stand the name of it, but it does create an opportunity if a person has no other means when they're released. They discourage you from using it if you have any other option. And it's for a very limited period of time. I think it's up to 90 days. And housing is so difficult to find when you've been formerly incarcerated. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit with an 800 credit score. Yes, I've been working hard on that for the last 2 years, and I still can't rent. My wife and I went to get a place, and we were denied. We were denied purely because of my criminal history. And remember, my last felony was in 1993. Context.
Yeah, and it was crazy, at least here, too, just to like speak a little bit more on that, because there was like, at least here, people were like, there at least was one service out in Phoenix that was like, trying to communicate with inmates while they were in there, like having them do like step work, because I believe they were like a recovery like type program in like housing. So it's like, that was like one thing that I saw that it was like, okay, that like seems like good. But then there were definitely like people telling me about like other halfway houses where it's like, oh yeah, definitely don't go there unless you like want to like relapse, or it's like not a good situation to like be there. And people like knew like which ones were like good and which ones weren't. But then also I heard some people, at least here, because, if you get like released, you can like be released here in Arizona without like an address if you don't have like parole or probation. And I think that's what happened to one of the guys that I had met, that they just like left, and then they're like didn't have anywhere to go like after that, and pretty much just had their JPay money card and just like the clothes that they gave them, and that was it. So
one more smaller piece of context before you ask the next question. He hit on something that's really important. If anybody's taken any courses and social movements and stuff like this is called NIMBYism, and it stands for not in my backyard. And so a lot of the places that he's talking about, whether you're talking about reentry or recovery, so if you're talking about, halfway houses for reentering from prison, or if you're talking about halfway or three-quarter houses when you've come out of rehab, they have a tendency to be in some of the shadier neighborhoods. And so people who are already trying to put their life together have criminality and substance use going on, all around them a lot of times. And that's one of the things we're trying to do here in Washtenaw County is we're trying to change the paradigm of that and get people into their own housing, get them into housing that they want where they want it, so that they're just in the neighborhood that they want to be in, because that's hugely important. And personally, we believe that, housing, stable housing should be a basic human right.
So you kind of talked about this a little bit, but can you talk more about the food that they had? I know that you worked in the kitchen too, so you were right there.
Yeah, so I worked in the kitchen for a couple weeks, and even going from like the county jail to like DOC, it was like, it wasn't good, but the food, at least in the county jail, was a little bit better. It was like a little bit better tasting. It was like fresher. But moving over into the DOC, and especially like working in the kitchen, it's like, you hear stories about like the meat like not being meat, or it's like not being good. I think I had read or I'd like heard someone talking about it. It's like, yeah, it's like the meat comes in these boxes that have a label on them that say like not fit for human consumption, or it's like, well, you'll open it up and it's like green or miscolored and like things like that. But seeing how like a lot of the food was made, it was just like, it's like a lot of like packaged like stuff. Like it's like a lot of like frozen stuff from a can, things that usually like lack like basic like flavor. And, you're given like a salt packet and like a pepper packet and like, that's it. But, at least here in Arizona, it was like pretty much every night, you get like a little helping of like beans. And it's like some vegetable from a can. The same sponge cake like every night until they run out of that sponge cake, switch it up, or pudding here too. It's like pudding or cake for dessert. And then
I wonder if your cake in Arizona was similar to that in Michigan that had almost no flavor, but it seemed to suck all of the saliva out of your mouth.
Yeah, I think it might be similar, very dry. And then there were even like, I think like some instances where, at least with the cake, but then I'll go on to like my next point too, but it's like, they ran out of cake batter. So it's like all they had left was, cornbread batter. So it's like, they like, I think tried to add like some sweetener to it. And I was like, yeah, it's like, that's your cake for tonight. It's cornbread, with some sugar in it, or with like a glaze like on top or something like that. It's like everyone ate it and was like, this is cornbread. But there were definitely like instances like that where I remember like going into the chow hall one day and it was like, something smells rotten. Like it like smelled like, it was like overwhelming, and it was definitely, you could tell it was coming from the meat. It like tasted okay enough. It's like you could like eat it, and like a lot of the guys like did, but then, it tasted like sour, and like sure enough, it's like the next day heard of like a lot of the guys complaining about like getting sick from the food, and hear the kitchen workers like talking about it, and they're like, oh yeah, it's like the the meat supply like went bad from the meat that they had gotten from a different yard, because the meat that was on our yard had also went bad, but they were just still serving us rotten meat, and that they had been doing that for at least a week, you know, just giving us this like rotten meat. It's like you could tell that it was like bad, but it wasn't until it was like, you know, really bad that they were like, okay, maybe we need to feed them something else. Maybe we need to like throw this away.
Not until someone got sick or they got sick.
Not until a bunch of people get sick.
A bunch of people get sick.
Yeah.
So let's turn this around a little bit. And what do you think the Department of Corrections is doing right?
I always love the pause. There's always a pause with this
long
question.
Pause,
like,
Patrick.
let me think about this for a minute.
Yeah. At least for me, is like I don't think I was in there like long enough to see like anything that they were like doing right. I saw like a lot of the like stuff that they were doing wrong, but I don't know, to say that they were doing things right, it's like difficult. I have to think about that for a little bit.
Okay, so what were they doing wrong that you saw?
A lot of it just came down to like, you know, just not addressing, I guess, like the needs of like some like basic needs that some of the inmates had, where it was like, you know, this could be like solved like pretty easily, but you know, it always like became like an ordeal. And that was like with almost like everything, like to get done was like an ordeal. It like took like a lot more time, and that was like frustrating to see, because it was like, to me, like looking at like a lot of the situations that would happen, or if it was like fixing something that needed to be fixed, you know, it was just like these like long processes. But I'm sorry, I like can't remember the question right now. I'm getting a little spacey right now. I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick.
Okay. So the Department of Corrections, what did you think they were doing right or wrong?
So since I was in there during the pandemic, I think they did their best to address the problems of the pandemic as like best as they could. Like seeing how they had implemented the video visits was something new that at least not in all the prisons here. You know, not all of them had that available before COVID hit. That became like a pretty standard thing in like a lot of the facilities that I had like went to, was like they were setting up like video visit booths, or they had their high-speed internet set up so that you can do your visits on the tablets and things like that. So like the way that they were like accommodating with that was like good. I think they were like trying to do their best to like make sure that everyone on the yard was safe, even though, you know, everyone on the yard was just irritated because of, you know, I don't want to wear this mask. It's like, why do we got to quarantine? Because, you know, it's like outbreaking out there. And it's just like, a lot of people were complaining about the way that they were handling it, but I think in the situation they were doing like the best that they could.
Right. So what do you see in your future?
I still feel like I have a lot of personal work that I need to do on myself, and I'm currently like in the process of doing that. And I think helping out with this podcast is definitely a part of that. Spending time in prison, you know, it's like you think about, okay, it's like, well, I'm gonna get out, and I like wasted, you know, this amount of time. You know, it's like I like tried to do some like good work on myself, but it's like, at least for me, it's like I'm like a doer. Like a lot of times it's like I need to be like doing something or like making something.
Right.
Like a very like creative person. So it's like not at least like having the normal outlets that I was like used to, you know, like making things with, because I'm a film and television studies major, and it's like that was like one of the things that I was like focusing on prior to being incarcerated, was I was like trying to get my degree in film and television production. And coming back out after being incarcerated, it was like, okay, I want to finish getting my degree. I want to get back to work. I want to start like creating things, creating art things. And but like since being out, I like have gone back to school. I'm like very close to getting my bachelor's. But I took like a lot more art classes and have like maybe just like switched my perspective a little bit more. It's like I like want to like make more art, and I want to like make more podcasts. I want to like hear more stories, because podcasts have been something that have like interested me for quite a while, like oral storytelling, just people talking with one another. It's like very powerful. And I think that, even though there are like a lot of podcasts out there, I don't think that, some of those podcasts, they're not reaching everyone. So, or they're not like, the right people like aren't being heard. There are still like so many more people that like need to be heard,
Yeah, I think a lot of the podcasts are more concerned with what they're saying. And I think one of the things that I enjoy about doing this, like this is at the end of my day. I started this at the end of an 8-hour day of work. But I don't consider this to be work, because the conversations we have here are more about the whys than the whats. What we're talking about is less important than why we're talking about it. It's because it's our experience. We're sharing something on a deeper level. We're connecting. And I think that's missing in the world today. And so as much as there are a lot of podcasts out there, I don't think that there are a lot of genuine conversations. And so I want to make sure that I thank you for that. And we didn't mention in the beginning that one of the reasons why Patrick is doing this interview today is not just because he was incarcerated, but because of the fact that he also volunteered to help us with this podcast and do the editing, and he's helping, with some of the graphic arts that'll go along with it and stuff. And there's a lot of talented people who've made mistakes. I heard it said by somebody recently that we understand this in business. In business, we always say, you want to know the key to a success? Make more mistakes. But when it comes to people who are formerly incarcerated, we seem to want to label them by that mistake and not by the successes that they can have from it. But I believe that you're on the right path, Patrick. I genuinely believe that. And I think that getting the more artistic flow of it and knowing the value of a good story, that's how we connect. I think you're going to do some big things in the world. And I'm going to hand this off to Robin to kind of close us up. But I wanted to make sure that I, thanked you profusely.
Actually, what about you? Do you want to ask the last question? Because it's kind of been stated before that you asked the last question. Do you remember it?
No.
What?
No, I'm thinking about Luanda, and I'm hoping she's not lost. She tried to call, so.
Okay, ask it and then leave. How about that?
I don't
Okay.
remember. I don't remember what the question is.
Oh, Patrick, are you still there?
Are you calling me back, Patrick? Is this you again, Patrick?
Hello? Yeah, I think the call dropped on my end or something, because I just checked my phone and it was wasn't there.
Oh,
Okay.
So you didn't hear us.
Well, the last question would be
Hold
this
on.
then.
Hold on, let me stop laughing.
And we're going to give you the last question, and the last question and the last word would be, if you could tell somebody, whether it's somebody getting out, somebody who's still in, or maybe somebody who's on their way in, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would you tell them?
I feel like I would tell them to take it slow, and to also remember that everything passes, everything is going to come to an end, at a certain point. But it's just, I feel like taking things slow, that's something that I've needed to remind myself. And that's what I was telling, because I was still talking to one of the guys that I was friends with in there. They still had a few more months after I had left. And that was one thing that I told them was, it's I wanted to get so much done after I had gotten released. It's I wanted to get a job. I wanted to get things situated with my food, and find work and get back to school and just do things, like so many things. And it's just like being out those like first 2 weeks, it's like, okay, I was able to like get a lot done, but then it's like, you know, check in with myself, and it's like I had like run myself into the ground and was like so just like exhausted. Like by the time I was like finished doing like all these things, it was just like forgetting to take care of myself. But yeah, just take things slow.
All right, I get that. And you're going to have to hear all my profuse praise of what you did, because when the call dropped, I was actually doing that. So when you do the edits on that, you'll get to hear all that. But again, we thank you, Patrick. We thank you for the work that you're doing and the work that we know that you will.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. It was a good conversation.
Thank you for listening to Conversations About a Brighter Way. Welcome home.
We would like to say thank you to the following. This podcast could not have been possible without Grove Studio providing the space. So Grove Studios is in Ypsilanti, Michigan, provides 24/7 self-service, rehearsal, and creative studios for musicians, hip-hop producers, DJs, podcasters, photo, video, and live streaming production. Creatives from around Southeast Michigan have called Grove home since 2018. For more information and booking, check them out online at grovestudios.space. We'd like to thank Patrick Domingo with podcast creation and editing. The beautiful music you hear in the intro and thank yous was written and performed by Chelsea-based singer, songwriter Annie Capps. If you're looking for a rootsy vibe, a touch of twang, and a soulful groove, look no further. You can find her at anniecapps.com. That's ANNIECAPPS.com. We'd like to thank our individual donors. Without them, there could not be a brighter way. Therefore, there could not be a conversation about a brighter way. We're very grateful for their constant support and the way they speak to the stigma that exists in the community on a daily basis. We'd like to thank United Way of Washtenaw County, Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, Nation Outside, and to our volunteers, mentors, and mentees. A Brighter Way is a community, and we could not be a community without all of its participants. So we thank all of you. Thank you very much.
Wait, subscribe and follow us on social media so you don't miss out on a single episode. And visit the website of brighterway.org for donation opportunities. We plan to give you more conversations in Season 1, and if you want to reach out to ask questions or send comments, you can email volunteering@abrighterway.org. This is Robin.
And this is Adam.
Peace out.